it is important for your own business, but I think of it more as life. I would actually encourage you to not even create one for your business to start, but start with your life vision statement, because your business should be built after that for every single person. And your business will only be successful if it works alongside your life goals. So at some point, you're going to get burnout otherwise. So get really clear on your personal life vision, and then make sure that your business that you're creating, whether it's that next step, whatever that is in alignment with where you want to go.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Today we have a very special guest, and this is a very special two-part podcast episode. So part one happens over on the Mama Has Goals podcast. And today I have Kelsey Smith in the studio. She is talking all about her business journey on this special part two episode. So who is Kelsey and why am I doing this special two-part episode? So after a complicated delivery of her son, Kelsey had the realization that while she had accomplished many goals, they weren't goals that brought her fulfillment. And if you've been following my journey at all, been here for the podcast, you know that this really resonated with me. So after she woke up from surgery, she wondered if she hadn't woken up, what story would she leave behind? Would her children know what brought her joy, what she stood for? This whole experience led Kelsey to her own journey of fulfillment and self-discovery, where she had the massive realization that this feeling was far too common for mothers all over the world. I mean, it was true for me. Kelsey knew she needed to normalize moms having big dreams and making their own fulfillment a priority, so she created a space that helped women and mothers do just that. Through her community, the Mama Has Goals phone app, events, and programs, Kelsey leads women to live the life of their dreams for themselves and their families, with the mission to help all current and aspiring mamas find their highest selves inside and outside of motherhood. Because there is so much synergy between Kelsey's story, my story, how they connect, how we left these lives behind. There is something so interesting in a journey about climbing a ladder that you have wanted to climb for so long, feeling success, everything is going according to plan, but then realizing that that might not be the right ladder. And taking the step to make that change is both incredibly amazing, but also really terrifying. Hey, Kelsey, thanks so much for being here. Super excited to carry on our conversation.
So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, we talked definitely a little bit about my story and my business and whatnot on kind of part one. So let's dive in and let's learn a little bit more about you and your business and how you got to this place.
Yeah, some similarities in the sense that once I got into my professional career, I was really focused on moving up, getting the job that I wanted, expanding my knowledge, and really finding my place in the industry. And after my first son was born, I had done just that. I had worked to get to my place that I was super excited about where I was at in the industry. As one of the few people. I worked in really kind of technology marketing in the wine industry. So implementing e-commerce platforms, customer segmentation, and the strategy behind marketing. And I loved it. I believe I was really good at it. And after my first son was born, I had complications that I didn't figure out until about a year later. Had a planned surgery. And then I was working, getting ready for a presentation that week. And it was about 2:30 in the morning. I was just a late night person. I just would rather be relaxed in the morning and work late at night, and was feeling a little off and ended up in the emergency room that night with my husband. Had to cancel my meetings, was texting my boss as I was basically bleeding out. Was like, hey, I'm not going to make it to my meetings today. And he was like, oh, is everything okay? Is it your kids, you? I was like, oh, it's me. But I just didn't operate that way. It wasn't even the environment's fault. It was just mine. And after passing out and waking back up, I realized that I needed to do things a little differently. I wasn't necessarily overworking myself, but my mentality around everything just fell off. And this question that still rings in my head weekly was, if you hadn't made it through that, what story would you have left behind? And it wasn't as much for everyone in my circle, but it was for my kids at that point. At that point, my son was only a year old. and he would have just been told stories about me, and I wanted to be proud of myself in those stories. And up to that point, it was just checking boxes. And I am still proud of that version of me because I hit all those things that I wanted to do and I loved it in that version. But that was this wake up call that there was something else. And fast forward, I realized there were so many amazing resources out in the world, just like you, doing really cool things. And I wanted to help women find those resources. So now Mama Has Goals is all about connecting women, current aspiring and empty nesting moms, to the resources they need to accomplish their goals, whether that's making the best Pinterest snack or hacking your laundry, like we were just talking about in our last episode, or it's launching a business or moving up in your job or organizing your house, anything in between. And it's been such a fun journey and so different than I expected and unplanned.
It's interesting you talk about kind of connecting those people. So I am super introverted. And one of the interesting parts of my podcast and the podcast journey is connecting with other people and having conversations that because it's almost like a structured, like you create this podcast, we're going to record, we're going to talk, and you end up connecting with these people and learning about their stories in a way that as an introvert, I wouldn't typically.
Yeah.
And so it's been this amazing journey to meet so many people. We're in season 3 now, so it's been a lot of cool entrepreneurs and different people. And I absolutely love hearing about people's stories and how they got to be where they are and whatnot. But it also has shown me that there are so many people that are so talented and so passionate about these different things. The internet is kind of a loud place. I mean, you go on TikTok and sometimes or YouTube or whatever, and you're seeing like the big names.
Mm-hmm.
That's the stuff that the algorithm is showing you. But there are so many people that are so talented at different unique pieces. And so connecting with them in a different way, listening to podcasts, being on podcasts, recording things and whatnot. So tell me a little bit more about your journey into the actual business piece. So you had this idea of connecting people and whatnot. How is your business different today than you maybe thought it would have been when you first got the idea? I know my business had so many kind of changes along the way, so I'm curious about yours.
Yeah, I do have business background, so I had some foundation. And then my career was kind of in building this technology marketing environment. So people always ask me, did you know how to build this? Because now I've built a phone app. And so they're like, did you know how to do that? And I'm like, no. There's things that really do help. Of course, but I've talked to people that have been in the healthcare world and they find parallels, right? Those are going to be different parallels than mine, but you're still going to find parallels in what you do. But when I first got this idea, it was an ebook. It was a PDF download it was about 30 pages where each topic had a list of like, hey, here are some ways I implement this into my life. And here are some links that can help you do it. And so that is really what, the prototype, the very first version of this looked like. And I didn't make relationships with those links or those people. They were just people that had impacted me that I had put into a PDF. And really what changed it is once I got it done, I threw that together in what feels like 48 hours. I had a 2-week-old. It was just such a crazy season. And I looked at my husband and I said, well, what happens when they're done with this? I was like, then what are they going to do? Do I start a Facebook group? Like, I don't know. How do I keep them together? And I started kind of just unpacking what this could look like. And I didn't necessarily want to be the sole person. I really, like you said, there were already so many talented people out there. I really wanted them to find their expert. And I started just thinking, like, what do you want? What do you want, Kelsey? Like, if you're building this, and my oldest at the time was about 2.5, and my youngest, like I said, was not even a month old yet. So I was spending a lot of time under babies. And so for me, it was a phone app. I was like, I want a phone app. So no matter where they are, they can go filter, search, say, I need help with this, and find this person. And so now that's what it's evolved into. And I would say the last year, it's just kind of improved its extra features, the interface, things like that. The core concept of it has stayed the same. But from that very beginning of it just being a PDF to what it is now, I mean, now it's a podcast and live events and this growing community of hundreds of women and resources all over the place. And it's so beautiful. But yes, it is so different than that first little inkling of, hey, what if I just put together this little download?
It's that evolution, and some businesses evolve so quickly, and other businesses stay the same. And so, what would you say to someone who's not sure if they should take that next step in their business? What they're doing is working, but they are, have some ideas, but they don't. It's almost like that feeling of, I kind of attribute it to, you have a friend, but you think that it might be maybe more. And you're like, well, I don't want to screw up the friendship. So, but maybe that person is the love of my life. So now they're kind of in that same phase of their business where they want to evolve, but they don't want to mess up what they've already got going.
I actually love that analogy because my husband and I were friends first. And I always say, like, a solid marriage is built on a really strong friendship. And even to
Mm-hmm.
this day, I tell him all the time, he always gets mad at me. He's like, stop acting like we have a bad marriage. But I'll be like, if you ever decide you don't want me as your wife, like, I still want to be friends. And I think that that's like, it is a good analogy for your business, though, because if this other idea doesn't work out, do you still have that foundation? Do you still have that foundation of what you've built to put back on? And if you don't, then maybe you shouldn't take that step. But if you're like, no, I'm clear on what I'm doing, I'm clear on what my why, as some people say, is, or my kind of big and little vision, and this is the step in the right direction beyond that, then I think you should almost always go for it. And the other reason I say that, in the question I would ask yourself is, what if you don't? If you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, if I do this, I could fail, but I'm going to learn, I'm going to give it a shot, I'm going to do all these things, then you should do it. But if you're sitting there and you're just kind of like trying to keep yourself busy and you have shiny object syndrome, and you don't really care if you don't try it, then it's probably just something that you're like distracting yourself with. And maybe you shouldn't take that step. But if you're really curious, if you're like, yeah, I mean, like, if I did that, all these other things would be really cool, or I'm always curious, I'm wondering this, there is so much that you will not know if you don't just try. And you have to try. And what's really the worst that could happen? You go back to that foundation, that friendship, you know? So you go for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it also, for me, when I come to kind of, giving feedback on things like that, I also think about, like, is it the same direction? So, like,
Mm,
for you, it was similar offer, same people, just expanding your offer, offering them something
yeah.
more. And oftentimes when we add to it and it goes in that direction, it's a growth of just offering more, offering the same clients a new service, or, a better experience, those types of things. But I think sometimes we get into this when you talked about shiny object syndrome. That's totally, it's like, oh, well, I also could do this. And it's like a different business idea
Yeah.
or a different revenue stream. And there's 100% ways to do that. But when it takes away from what we're already doing, so you have a business and it's kind of, still new and it's gaining traction. And then all of a sudden we have like another business and it's slowly gaining traction. That, really tends to take away from the success speed of both. Whereas
Mhm.
offering additional more to that same is just an expansion, an evolution of the current business.
Yeah. And you might do that. Like, I've definitely done that. I've seen things in other people and I've been like, ooh, I could do that too. And then I've pulled it back and been like, no, okay, yeah, I could do that, but it doesn't mean that I
Mm-hmm.
should do that, and pulled it back. And I think that you'll only know sometimes by trying. But yes, like, is this something that you're offering that is in alignment with where you want your future business to go? And an example I'll give you is when I started my business, I had so many people reaching out to me for personal coaching. And that's not what I built my business on. And so I do strategy sessions and I do some coaching, but I started finding myself in marketing myself as a coach. And I was like, wait, I actually don't want to do that. That's not the core of my business. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's so many amazing coaches out there, but that's where it came back to. I was like, for the right person, for the right situation, sure, I can provide that service. But when it comes to where my marketing is going, where my energy is going, what my brand is known for, that's not what my big picture is. So when you look at your business and a decision you make, does it have to be something that you're marketing, or can it just be something that you sure have as an offer for the right person, but you don't necessarily build out this big marketing strategy around, or it's core to what people are seeing about you? And I think that there's a lot of value in just kind of having things in your back pocket, but it doesn't always mean that it has to be the end all be all. And also, sometimes it is the end all be all, and you should take your business in that direction.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. We kind of chatted about it on our first episode about kind of how my business evolved and how I wasn't really sure at the beginning exactly what I wanted to offer. And, I had left corporate, wasn't sure exactly what I was offering, but I was like, I can do all of these things. And at the beginning, you kind of say yes to lots of different things.
Yeah.
But I found so much of what I was selling was my time, that
Hmm.
one-on-one time.
Yeah.
And so quickly realizing that there's only so much of my time to go around. And so I was spending so much time doing strategy sessions, coaching calls, all of these things, and just building out these lists of things I needed to do later. And my time was becoming a more and more, finite resource that was the
Yeah.
problem. And it was really that moment of, hey, let's take a step back and remember we're an agency providing services, and we have a team, and I need to be leaning in and marketing
Yeah.
those services so that the team can be super busy, because otherwise I'm the one that is super busy, and that's not running a business as much as it is doing that coaching piece. And so it's sometimes taking that step back and saying, hey, what are we really marketing, what are we really pushing? And you
Yeah.
know what, some of those coaching clients that we had from the very beginning, we still have,
Yeah.
and they're happy and we're happy, but it's definitely those same packages or offers. That's not what we're marketing now. So it's okay to keep sometimes what you're not going to keep going with,
Yeah.
or keep it in your back pocket. That's such great advice.
Yeah, I think getting clear, like, what is your role? And I like to say for your life and business, but for your business to say, like, are you the CEO? Are you the founder? Are you the provider? What is your role? And there's no one right answer. No one can answer that for you. They may ask you
Mhm.
questions for you to think about it, but you're going to have to decide because for one person, being the sole provider in their business is their goal, and that's amazing. If you're really good at that and you love your business in that way, that's great. In other businesses, that person can't be the provider. They are just on the top, making sure everything is flowing. It has a different strategy and goal. And I meet with some women in my community and they're like, I just don't know if I want my business to be that big. Or other women, they're like, I want this giant thing. There's not a right answer. Both are difficult in their own ways. And you'll just have to figure out which one do you want to run and which one do you want to be behind.
One of the things that we spoke about at the very end of your episode was that exact moment that you were just talking about. Maybe I don't want my business to be that big.
Yeah.
And so really unpacking why do we not want our business to be that big? And typically most people will say, because I'm out of time, I don't want to take more time away from my family, I don't want to give up more sleep, I've been wanting to get back to the gym for, like, I don't know, 3+ years, and I still can't fit it in. And so the thought of taking on more in the business becomes overwhelming. It becomes like, oh my goodness, this is already chaotic. Why would I want more chaos? But I think we have to remember that as our business grows, we reach new opportunities as
Mhm.
well. And so it's the fact that maybe you can afford a assistant that, manages your emails. Maybe you can outsource social media, and, maybe you're going to just record, video clips, and someone's going to edit them and schedule them and caption them and do all these things, whatever that is for your business, whatever you don't love doing. But oftentimes it's learning how to accept those resources and utilize them, because the business, as it grows and you have more resources and more people, it can actually be less chaotic.
Yeah.
But if you do the same way, if you're just doing more of the way you're already doing it, then yes, people are like, oh, I don't want more, it's too much.
Yeah. Someone told me when I first started my business, said the first thing you need to do is get your systems organized, get your SOPs, make sure you have everything in place. And I don't think that people understand that enough. I know I didn't. I was like, yeah, I mean, my email's organized. I have spreadsheets. I have Google Drive set up. Like, but it's all the little things. Like, have an album on your phone for your screenshots that you're saving things to, for, your brand guide so that you can use that on your Instagram stories. Like, so many little things that take time that you wouldn't think about. A notes where you're a specific notes section in your phone where you're popping in ideas that come up in the middle of the night. And then there's also your SOPs of recording, like, how do you do this and how do you do that in your business? You are never too small to do those things. And while you're doing that, I think it gives you so much clarity on the things that you don't want to do and the things that you're like, yeah, I could be bigger if people did these things for me, or I'd want to do this. I think there's a fine line between loving your business the way it is and staying true to like just helping that one person. People say that a lot, like focus on that one person you're helping. I think that's really, really important. But there's also this side of like, are you building something to scale? And there are certain things that you can set up to say, okay, I'm building this for a different end result than just having 10 clients a year. And there's, again, no right or wrong answer, but knowing that allows you to build the foundation in like a way that works best for you and your personal foundation. Like that's what we're talking about, is like outsourcing and saying like, okay, I would rather only see these number of clients so that I could have this lifestyle outside of it. Or I would rather build my business this way to be able to have this day to day. And, you know, right now my business is transitioning that I don't do as much of the administrative work. And like today I'm on 3 podcast recordings, including most of those being back to back. So I spend a lot of my time doing things like that now, or emceeing and speaking or connecting with people for the business, where it used to be a lot administrative stuff and it transitions. Some people love the admin stuff. So just making sure that I have that set up. But because I set up those SOPs before I needed to pass it off to someone, now I can send like a quick message and a link that's like, hey, can you take this over? Can you do this? Let me know if you have any questions. And that has given me a lot more flexibility. And I didn't do it right away. But the more that I learn and the more that I put that there, it also gives me back control to say, yeah, I actually don't care if I do that and someone else can do that. Um, Another example I'll give you, though, is when I first started my podcast, the podcast team that I used wrote scripts and kind of an outline. And that was just part of their service that they did for everyone. And what I realized is I actually really didn't like that. It made me feel like I didn't have as much control over the conversation. It actually confused me where I wanted to take the conversation. So I took that back, right? So there's certain
Mhm.
things that you may be like, you know what, actually, that's not something for someone else to do. And so I do spend my time doing that and I prefer that. But I don't feel like I need to create every single Instagram template that goes out, or some of my web pages are built by other people. You know, there's other things that don't have to have, I still approve everything. I'm still at that stage of my business where my eyes do hit everything, but I don't have to do every single thing. But some things do need you. I hope that answered your question.
It does. It does. It's interesting because sometimes you have to, you know, I kind of call it like battle testing,
Yeah.
like your SOPs or a concept. So same thing when we started outsourcing some social media content, I didn't give a huge amount of structure to it. I kind of said like, here's the website, here's the, you know, our brand fonts and colors and yada yada. But I didn't give as much structure. And it was interesting. It was a very interesting exercise because what she came back with the first time, based on the website and whatnot, was a lot of stuff for things that were very old to us. Like they were offers we were no longer focusing on, or, and it's like, okay, so when you took a look at our business, that's what you felt like was important to us.
Yeah.
And that isn't what was important to us anymore. So when we went to the next month, I said, okay, here's the structure that we're, you know, these are the things we're focusing on right now. These are things we don't want to keep marketing for. You know, this is kind of the new focus. These are some things we're talking about this month. And she like nailed it, absolutely nailed it, and gave us so much more clarity on some of those things. But that first piece, what it showed me was, hey, we need to go back and look at some of these things on the website and whatnot, because from that 30,000 foot view of outside eyes, it was like, oh, we're missing the
Yeah.
mark here. And same thing with SOPs. You know, you don't want to overthink it sometimes. A lot of people will, you know, spend so much time and really you know, dive into these things. But sometimes it's someone else going through it and being like, hey, I got stuck at step 7. You know, what happens next? And then you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I missed this piece. And so, you know, I think as business owners who are doing things, you know, whether it's typing a password with muscle memory or the, you know, anything, sometimes it really just takes being able to go in and test the
Hmm.
SOPs, have someone else look at the website, you know, and make sure that it really is in alignment with where we want to be and supports our end objectives. So, you know, when you're going through your business and so you've got the podcast and you've got the app and the website, are those your three main pieces and how they work together?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, we repurpose a lot of things. Like we have YouTube and we have blogs, and we also have, you know, in-person meetups and events. But at the core, that's our cycle.
Right, right. And so, you know, to a business owner that is struggling to feel like they have to be everywhere, because I
Oh
think as
gosh, yeah.
entrepreneurs, that can be overwhelming, you know, feeling like, okay, so we've got YouTube and TikTok, and now, you know, Instagram has come out with their newest add-on
Threads.
threads and yes. So it's kind of, it's this feeling of, oh my goodness, I need to be in all the places. So do you talk to people about, you know, how to be in all the places, or do you recommend more being strategic about choosing places? What's your kind of feedback and philosophy on that?
Yeah, a couple different things. You know, people do say like figure out where your audience is, right? And that is important. You shouldn't be, you know, all over TikTok if your audience isn't there. So allow yourself to figure out where your audience is, but then like where do you enjoy being? It is so much easier to create content for a platform that you like to be on. Now, if you do start to repurpose things and you do start to want to be in different platforms, I think what's most important is finding what your long form content is. And long form can be an Instagram caption, right? It doesn't have to be a long blog post or an email or a podcast, but you should be creating content somewhere that you own your audience. So, email really is the best for that because you have direct contact to them. While you do own your podcast audience, like I don't know who's listening to this right now. I can't follow up specifically with you. And if something happens to me or this podcast, I can't connect with you in another way. So email, I think most people that I look up to for business advice would recommend that you're building an email following for sure. Now, what you're sending in your email can be utilized from other platforms. So people don't want to hear the exact show notes or the transcript from today into the email, but can we talk about one of the things we talked about and then expand on it in the email? Can we give a preview? I try to follow a structure and then I fit between my podcast. So right now I have 2 podcast episodes a week. That's considered my long form content. I have a solo episode and an interview. And that is repurposed into social media posts, blog posts, and YouTube. And my podcast team actually does almost all of that. And so, again, utilizing a team is amazing. But now, for certain people like you have a specific service that helps my audience. So rather than you just having a blog post with the episode, I may come to you and say, okay, Tiffany, and let's pick out 2 ways that you can help my community. And let's also get you a page in the app. And we're going to link it back to the podcast episode. And we're going to talk about it on Instagram. And we're going to link these things. And it's more marketing pieces than actual just content. But if you're giving, you know, 5 ways to know your numbers, I'm going to say, oh, hey, here's 1 way on Instagram. Here's 3 ways in the email. We talked about it on the podcast. And the download to actually fill it in yourself is in the app, is maybe 1 way that I would do that. It is different to each person. And the reason I chose podcasting for my long form content is because I enjoy it. So, like you had said, you know, having conversations and learning those different sides of people is so much fun to me. If you don't enjoy it, it's probably not the right platform for you. And it is work. You know, I do hear people in this space talk about, oh, podcasting's free to get started. Just get yourself a mic on Amazon and jump on. While that's true on the surface, that's not true in detail. And I do try to make sure that people know that when I'm talking to them. I love podcasting. I'm a big advocate for it, but it's a process and it's a team and you have to be consistent. So it's not just, hey, when you feel like it, record. If you want it to, if you're just trying to record your life and it's a vocal diary, then that's great. But if it's a business asset and a tool, it does require more. So long form content, figure out where you want to show up, outline how you can repurpose it. And like anything, just get started because you're going to realize how you can repurpose things the more that you do it and the more that it works for you. When it comes into email, the best way that I've found for myself, because for some reason I really struggled with getting started with a regular email sequence, was just picking 4 topics a month. So I have 4 topics a month. They change in what the concepts are behind them, but like overarching topics that I go between. And I got some of this idea from Jess Glazier, also Jess DeRose. And she talks about like having a personal story, sharing a case study or a testimonial. I use the one of the weeks as like a newsletter roundup of all my resources. And then the 4th one kind of goes into some sort of teaching or learning. So I think for most of your listeners, they can follow a similar kind of length of those 4 emails. And then I pull in my podcast episodes and my app content and community conversations. If you have a community aspect, like show that. That is what works well for me. And so bulleting that out for you again, just one more time, long form content, show up where your audience is, but also where you like to be. Repurpose it to at least one place to start. Pick one place. And then from there, make sure you do have a good email strategy. And if that's a part of everything up above, then great. But if you're just repurposing on YouTube and Instagram, then make sure somehow you're incorporating email.
Right. You know, when you break it down like that, it sounds so manageable. And so for me, I've struggled with email consistency. It's definitely the weaker side, but it's something that we're definitely focused on. And you know, I find when we're talking about repurposing, a lot of times we're taking content and just taking it from platform A and putting it to platform B. So we use a tool called repurpose.io to do some of that. So like if we upload to TikTok, it takes that video and automatically adds it to like a Google Drive folder, post to Instagram Reels, that kind of thing, YouTube Shorts. But it's just that same form of content. And I think the part that you just elaborated on that is so key. And I've heard Rachel Peterson talk a little bit about turning like some of the long form into other content, but I think it's often missed is that it's taking some of the concepts, like you said, maybe one thing you talk about in the podcast episode, and then taking that and putting it into a social post. It's not just taking the podcast and putting that same chunk of content in multiple places.
Yeah.
It's actually taking the ideas, the concepts, the learnings, the chatting, the discussion, and breaking that down and then putting that into different pieces. So whether that, like you said, is one part into the newsletter, whether that's, you know, into a carousel of Instagram posts or however that works best for your business. But I think that sometimes, you know, we've invested into whether it's a podcast episode, which just like you said, is so much more than just grabbing a mic and hitting record. But taking that and then really utilizing it. And so oftentimes business owners have so much content just sitting there that's maybe only been used, you know, a third of the way.
Yeah.
And so then they're kind of, you know, you hit that wall of like, oh my goodness, I don't have anything else to say. I don't have anything else to talk about. Sometimes it's just going back and kind of breaking down what you already have and taking parts of it.
Yeah.
And utilizing them again.
Yeah. And I do think that's, you know, when you talk about like CEO days and CEO tasks, I think that's something that works well. I actually just did that where I realized now that I've been in my business for about a year, have a bunch of content all of a sudden. And it felt like I had no content. And now I have all this content. I have all this video and documentation, all these things. And so what I did is I mapped out, okay, if I were to be creating social media content 7 days a week, 2 posts a day, what would I want that to look like? What are some of those topics and how would that, how could I repurpose things and how would I create new things? And so I just kind of made like a bulleted list for that. And then what I did is I took a couple minutes to organize my different files. Like you said, I don't use that repurpose.io and I want to go check it out now, but I don't use that. And what I did is I just said, okay, I'm going to take this one video and I'm going to give it to my VA or I'm myself. I'm going to pull it into a program. I don't think this is probably the right tool to use for this, but I found it really helpful. I used Descript for a period of time and the reason I liked that not being like a video editor is I could pull in a video from anything that I had done, someone else's podcast episode, like make sure when you're on other people's platforms that you're asking for your content back. And then even if you're not posting the exact same thing, but then I can go pull one clip that you don't have to do and pull it back in. And so I would pull that into Descript and I would just like glance through the transcript and I'd be like, oh, I like that quote. I like that quote. And I could just highlight those and then export them to a reel and pull that. And then I would either do it myself or I would pass that to my virtual assistant and I would say, hey, can you create a reel with some of these clips? I've put them all in this folder. And there is this balance of letting go of control. I think that's the biggest thing is like you have to let go of control or you have to do all this yourself. So sometimes I would get some and I'd be like, hey, can you switch this on it? Or I would be like, that's perfect, great. And I actually just my past virtual assistant moved on to a new role in the same like agency. And so now I have a new one and she was creating my so I have everything templated. Again, I think as many templates as you can create so you have that version of control. And then I basically say, here are all the folders, can you fill them in? And that then gives her the ability to create something beautiful within like our brand guidelines and templates. And I give her all the copy. I like being able to create my copy. So I say like, hey, for these things, can you use copy from from podcast episodes, from emails, from these things that are being repurposed? But again, instead of my 3 paragraphs, it's 3 sentences that she then picked out those 3 sentences. She chose what those 3 were. So utilizing a good organizational strategy, but then also a flow of saying, okay, if I were to pull these into whatever you can show it, if it's once a week that you're posting, whatever it is, twice a day, once a week, whatever it is, to say, if I were just going to be posting that, what would I be pulling in? And then repurposing those things in that way. So I use that for carousels. I use that for posts. Now, where I highly recommend that you get something input is sometimes I will create all these things and they never get posted. So make sure that they are actually finding their way to your client and consumer by getting posted and using whether it's a posting platform or setting up your emails in advance, whatever that is. But that's where the CEO comes back is you have to like make sure that it's happening. So I think that it's just that long form content, yes, pulling it in between. And I always have to remember the percentage of your followers that are actually seeing your content is very small. So unless they're going to your page, even if you are repurposing something, I actually haven't needed to do that yet. But if you're posting the same post or the exact same video that you posted 2 months ago, the chances of someone seeing it is so small when recognizing it, and they might love it. They'd be like, oh, I loved when she shared this before. So I think that's the other thing. If you're like, I don't have that content yet, then go back and look at your numbers, what performed really well previously or what flopped, and try it again. Maybe it was just like a bad day and try it out again and see. But yeah, cutting up content. I actually think Gary Vee talks about that really well. Is he'll talk about one of the reasons he'll go speak places is it just created 2 weeks of content for him from that one keynote. So think about how you can repurpose that way.
So Gary Vee was like one of my original people, online business venture-y, you know, whether it's like a business influencer, speaker type that I ever followed back when I was in corporate. And I traveled across the country to go to this event that he was at and, you know, stood in line and did the whole thing and felt like a total, like one of the people in the video. But later then saw that same keynote that I had seen in person, chopped up into some video. And it was like, okay, this is super interesting. And I was also at an event recently last year with Dan Lok, 2 events for Dan Lok. And they, when he does his live event, I mean, they pull out all the stops, first of all. It's absolutely amazing, but full camera crew.
Yeah.
Lighting, camera, boom, this and that. And again, it goes into, but these are people that are putting out all of this content all the time. And so they're saying, hey, if I'm going to stand on a stage and I'm going to speak, I'm going to look good. The lighting's going to be right. The, you know, recordings are going to be there. And even to the point where they had, Dan Lok had said, hey, if you're interested in offering kind of like a video testimonial of this event, like talking about what you learned or whatever, you can get this specific book. And it was like all of the email subject lines and Instagram captions that their top 50 performing over the last 5 years or something like that. And I was like, now that seems like a super valuable book to
Yeah.
get my hands on. So even as someone who at that time was like really nervous, I'm like, ooh, like, I mean, because they had like the person with the mic, like it felt like a newscast thing. And I
Yeah.
was like, ooh, it was totally out of my comfort zone, but I was like, I want that book. So then you did it. And so you're like, okay, because now you watch his video back and you're like, they've got a little clip about this person talking about the success or that. And so had they just said to me, hey, do you want to be on our video? I'd have been like, oh, thanks anyway, but no.
Yeah.
And so it really is kind of, they've obviously figured out that secret sauce in terms of what helps people to say yes and whatnot. And I think it really is figuring out whatever that is in your business.
Yeah.
And then making, having either the right tools or the right people in place to capture exactly what you need to utilize everything to the maximum.
Yeah. And I think giving yourself grace if you don't right away. But I
For
love
sure.
that idea, first of all, to get testimonials in that way. I haven't heard quite that before, and that's amazing. I'm definitely going to make that my own. But, I found myself being asked to be on panels and MC events, and it felt really fast. And one of my marketing friends and consultants was like, hey, make sure you're hiring someone to come and record you for video. And for a couple of these things, I was like, I'm not doing that, but that's a good thing for the future to think about. I just didn't have enough lead time. It wasn't a great
Mm-hmm.
choice. CFO and you will say, like, I was looking at my numbers. I'm like, I don't know. I just don't see this panning out yet. But one thing I would recommend is if you are asked to speak anywhere, asking the host to get copy of the video, just like I was saying, even on the podcast. And it doesn't have to be edited. Like if you can just get the raw files, then you can still make it your own. And that's huge value to you. Now, on the flip side, as a host, I hosted my first event to launch my business. I didn't have a following yet, didn't have a big thing going on, but I had speakers fly on their dime across the country to come and speak. And part of what I offered them was video content. So if you're also looking to host something and you're like, I don't have it in my budget for a speaker fee or to be able to pay these people, if you're offering content, that is huge. And even asking big names to come on your podcast. I recently just heard Lindsay Schwartz with Powerhouse Women talk about this. Someone offered her, they said, hey, I'm booking a podcast studio space. I'd love to have you on the podcast. She's not really doing interviews right now, but the person was like, I'll give you all of this content. And it's in a professional studio. You're going to get 3 like fully edited reels and the full episode, all these things. Those are ways to provide value when you don't have to necessarily pay cash, but you're still giving an exchange. So I think as business owners, those are things that we have to be really creative and remember, like, what value would I want and where can I provide value within my budget too?
Absolutely. That is so valuable. And while that exact technique wouldn't necessarily apply to every business owner, it really is, whether it is customers or whether it is your vendors or whoever that is in your business, finding ways to provide people, anyone, value so that they can assist you in your journey towards success. So if you had one tangible tip for someone to implement in their business today that could offer them, real benefit next week, what would that be for you?
Goodness. I think so much of what we've talked about is getting your systems organized. And so something that helps me a lot is doing a time audit. I often realize where I'm spending way too much time in my business. And so just writing down like day to day what you do for the next couple days and figuring out where do you need to implement an organizational strategy in your business is like the logistics side of what we talked about today. I think where you could make the biggest impact. And then beyond that, where we started this conversation is just get really clear on what feels good in your business and what do you want to do. And so for me, that often looks like creating a vision statement. And not, if you think back to corporate days of your business handbook, of your mission statement, your values, your vision statement, no one likes it when they work in that workplace environment. No one even knows what most of them are, but it is important for your own business. But I think of it more as life. I would actually encourage you to not even create one for your business to start, but start with your life vision statement, because your business should be built after that for every single person. And your business will only be successful if it works alongside your life goals. So at some point, you're going to get burnout otherwise. So get really clear on your personal life vision and then make sure that your business that you're creating, whether it's that next step or that shiny object syndrome that we talked about at the beginning, whatever that is in alignment with where you want to go. Those are the two things I would do.
Absolutely. That is so valuable. And I 100% wholeheartedly agree about starting with the personal. The business has to support the personal, not the other way around. So where can people connect with you, Kelsey? You've talked about your app. How can they download it? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, so definitely go listen to our part 1 conversation at the Mama Has Goals podcast. And then the Mama Has Goals app is free. You can download it and get support and resources from your app store. We also have a daily check-in for yourself to just take some notes. It's personal to you. No one sees it. And then also a journaling platform. And I'm most active on Instagram, but you can also catch me checking out what Threads is all about at Mama Has Goals. And this is Kelsey Smith.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.